Hello, thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Erin Parks, and I'm with Oklahoma Family Network. So, we are a statewide nonprofit organization that helps families with kiddos with special needs and behavioral health care challenges. So, I just want you to know that we are here this evening. This is being recorded and will be able to be put on our YouTube channel. We also have, just for your information, a podcast with over 80 family stories of encouragement and inspiration. We do Calm in the Chaos Yoga every Thursday, and we do monthly mental health presentations. We'll be doing two a month. And we also do Toolbox Tuesdays on the second Tuesday of every month. You can go to oklahomafamilynetwork.org, click on our events. We also have an Oklahoma Family Network Facebook page that has lots of information that you can join us. So now that we got that out of the way, I would like to say that we have the pleasure of having Bayless here and Bales. I got it. I got Bales. I did it. And we're going to talk about overdose prevention. And this is a topic that is so important. And so we really appreciate you giving us your time to listen to this. And that way we can help our own families and we can help those that we serve. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to you. And we again appreciate your time this evening.
Ms. Erin, thank you so much for having me. I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen right quick. I made a little PowerPoint presentation for us. And we're going to make it presentation mode. Does everything look like it's pulling up correctly for us?
We don't see it quite yet. Did it say share? I don't see. Did it have the share button on? Oh, there we go. It's getting ready to share. Yep, now we can see it perfect.
Beautiful. Okay, so just gonna go ahead and do this. Fantastic. So as Ms. Erin said, I'm Bales Chaples. I'm with the Oklahoma Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services. I'm a program manager, and my whole job is teaching people about overdose prevention, with the secondary follow-up of giving people access to naloxone, which is one of the medications that we use to reverse an opioid overdose in progress. So we're going to be talking a little bit about that, but we're just going to get into it together. So, training objectives for this presentation. After we're done chatting for about an hour, hopefully all of you will come out of this with an understanding of the landscape of youth substance abuse, an understanding of the risk and protective factors for substance use in youth, kind of an idea of the overdose prevention strategies and risk reduction tools that we use, some tips and tricks for safety planning for overdose prevention, and tools and tricks for how to communicate all of this information to your kiddos and to your young adults. So, first and foremost, I'm going to tell you right now, I'm bad at lecturing. I'd really much rather have a conversation with you. So, expect that I'm going to ask you questions and am really excited to hear your feedback. And if you're not comfortable coming off mute, go ahead and pop those in the chat. I'll be making sure that I watch those so that I can get your feedback as we go. But yeah, feel free to jump in. You're not interrupting, we're just having a conversation. So first, a lot has changed since I was a kid. Even I feel it. I'm no longer hip with the youths, tragically. But this holds true when we're talking about substance use. So I imagine when you were a kid, substance use looked a lot different. I know that it looked a lot different when I was considered a youth. So when you were young, what were the trends that you saw? What myths or stories did you believe? What was the messaging around prevention like for you? If anyone would like to share, please do. Or for those watching on YouTube later on, if you want to add your comments, go ahead and do that. No worries at all. But we know that substance use is going to look a lot different for our kids right now. So maybe we can spend some time thinking about what kind of messages our kids might be receiving about substance use, what the trends currently look like for them. I know not a day goes by that I don't open up my Facebook app and see a new thing that is like the kids are doing substances. Here's a code so that you can see what your child is texting about and if they're ordering cocaine from Snapchat. It's a scary time to be a parent, right? And we get hit with a lot of information about what the narrative looks like. And we're all really, really concerned for the health of our kids. So the next slide we're going to show is going to be some of the statistics that surround what is actually happening in the world of youth substance use. And it might be surprising, especially because we have a current idea that it's really, really prevalent. A lot of our kids are really at risk of this. So let's see how our expectations line up with the stats. So first and foremost, we are going to look at the information from the YRBSS. Now, this is a survey that is run nationally. It is for the entire United States, and they run it every year. And this is available for you to look at online, so you have access to this information as well. But for the most recent run of YRBS data, 2021 to 2023, you can see that youth substance use has actually decreased across all substances, which is wild, right? That doesn't necessarily square with the messaging that we're currently receiving about it being so prevalent in our youth circles. In fact, you can see that in 2023, only 10% of high school students had reported ever using illicit substances, and that's in their entire lifespans. 12% of high school students reported misusing prescription opioids in their lifetime. So only 12% of the people ever in their entire lives have reported misusing prescription medication. And only 4% of those report current use. So when I say current use, what I mean is any incidents of use within the past 30 days. In 2023, we can also see that 22% of high school students report drinking alcohol within the past 30 days. So 22% of the students polled exhibit current use. And then 17% of high school students report current cannabis use. So this is for the whole nation. And on the next slide, we're going to see how we square up in Oklahoma to those numbers. But first, I do want to pause. Does anybody have any questions or thoughts about these stats?
Definitely think they're so interesting because that's not what you really think, right? I mean, so yeah, it's very interesting.
Right? Like significantly lower than I was expecting when I first went into this and when I was starting to do my research. And it typically takes most folks by surprise. So next question, do you think Oklahoma is higher or lower than the national average in these statistics?
I would say higher.
Okay, interesting.
Me too.
Gotcha. So you're not entirely incorrect. We're going to, thank you. Okay, so in some areas we're higher, in some areas we're actually lower. So I don't know if you guys know this or not, but Oklahoma actually runs every 2 years, and they run it through the Department of Mental Health, something called the OPNA, which is the Oklahoma Prevention Needs Assessment. It's free to y'all, and it is an opt-in. So you have to opt in to let your child take this, but it is a survey about all of the different behavioral aspects, especially regarding substance use or mental health. It's like Oklahoma's very own YRBS. So we ask these questions and it gets issued to 6th, 8th, 10th, and 12th graders. So your kiddos are theoretically taking this every 2 years, so that we can gauge their responses over time and we can track those trend lines and we can look at all of the different ages and we can get a really in-depth analysis of what the landscape looks like for our kiddos and where we need to be focusing our prevention needs, hence the name. So we actually have the data for the 2023-2024 school year right up here. And 24% of the students that we had who took our test ever report using alcohol, with 8% of them reporting current use. So that's our 6th, 8th through 12th graders, and that's for the aggregate of all of those grades, which still seems pretty low to me, that 24%. It's a little bit higher than the national average, and that 8% current use is a little bit higher than the national statistic. But we also see that 15% of students report ever using cannabis in their entire lifetime, with only 6% of those reporting current use, which is still lower than what we see nationally. And then for prescription medication, only 14% of our students report ever misusing prescription medication, which is a relatively low number. And only 4% of them report current use. How do we feel about this?
Oh no, it's interesting. Like looking at the data. I like data, so makes you think, I think.
Yeah, which is the whole point. And one of the things that's interesting to me about this specifically is that it very much doesn't mesh with the idea that we have of our students being really, really into exploring substance use. For the last several years, in fact, we've seen like a general downward trend in substance use across the board. And that includes cigarettes and nicotine products as well. So, with this information in front of us, we are going to talk about some risk and protective factors, which seems like a little bit of a jump, but I promise it'll make sense because we're going to look at some of the statistics around the specific risk and protective factors that apply to the kiddos in Oklahoma. So first and foremost, just to get us all on the same track, a risk factor is anything that makes a situation more likely to occur or makes it more dangerous or lethal in the event that it does occur. And a protective factor is going to be anything that makes a situation less likely to occur or help mitigate some of the harm or some of the damage in the event that it does occur. I like to think about protective factors like bubble wrap. It's not going to stop your package from getting kicked down the stairs, but it is going to make sure that what's in your package stays safe. So, what are some risk factors that you think might influence youth substance use? Or vice versa, what are some protective factors that you think might help in preventing youth substance use?
I mean, I would say maybe a risk factor could be like, we're very like trauma in the past could be a risk factor, or situations that they're having. Yeah, Nancy says trauma too. That's the first thing I think of. And
So
maybe go ahead. Yeah.
That is like the top tier predictive factor. Having a score over 4 is a pretty big one, just in general. But other ones. And
maybe like friend groups, or I don't know if that, I don't know.
They do, yeah.
The sense of belonging.
Belonging.
Yeah, a sense of belonging for sure. Yes, all of you guys are in the correct vein. But looking at the risk factors for substance use specifically for Oklahoma. So this is also information that is pulled from the OPNA. So when we gave this survey out, we also asked about all sorts of things related to all of these risk and protective factors, and they break them up into 4 separate categories. And if you're interested in what the survey looks like, we actually have our testing instruments listed on our website, so you can see exactly what questions are being asked and how all of those fit into the results that we get. But I'm going to start big and work our way in. I also want to note that all of these are on purpose in a Venn diagram because they all interact and overlap with one another. Also, these data are reported in the context of students, percentage of students that are considered high risk in these categories and in these areas. So at the community level, which is the biggest, widest level, and often is one of the things that has the biggest impact on those risk factors, just like we know that our community level supports have a really big impact on protective factors. Top of the list is perceived availability of drugs. 19% of the students we surveyed expressed feelings like they could really access drugs in their community. 33% of those are considered at high risk when we're talking about laws and norms that are favorable to drug use or substance use. And then 50% of the kids that we polled report feeling low neighborhood attachment. So they don't feel like they belong in their communities. They're not really attached or engaged to those spaces. And they really don't feel any sort of like connection or pride. Going on to the school risk factors, one of the biggest ones that we see is academic failure. And we have 37% of the people who responded reporting that they would be at high risk for academic failure. Then talking about family, the first one up that we have is favorable parental attitudes towards drug use. 26% of the students that were polled are considered at a high risk for that particular risk factor. So maybe their parents are significantly more laissez-faire about drug use. Maybe some of the questions that we ask kids to determine this is, how mad do you think your parent would be if they found out that you were smoking weed? Or how upset do you think your parent would be if they found you with cigarettes? Something similar to that. Family conflict is a big one. 34% of our respondees are considered high risk in that category. And then 54% of our respondees are considered high risk for having favorable parental attitudes towards antisocial behavior. So antisocial behavior is a big category of things. And I like to sum it up in the most efficient way as anything that prevents you from being a good community member. Maybe your parents don't allow you to go and have friends. Maybe they don't let you go and engage in your school projects. Maybe they really are not jazzed about you going and volunteering. Maybe they really don't care if you miss school or you play hooky or any of the other things that would make you a good community member. But going into that individual and peer category, into that little circle, that's typically the one we think of the most when we think about substance use. We think, well, who are their kids hanging out with? Who are their friends? Are their friends good people? Are their friends using drugs? Like, is that what's happening? I heard all the time when I was a kid about how important it was to have good friends that like were engaged in good things. But we actually see that individual and peer pressures and peer risk factors rate relatively lower in comparison to all of the other larger surrounding risk factors. So it's less about who your kids are friends with or their own individual attitudes and beliefs, and significantly more about some of the other surrounding attitudes and risk factors. Does that make sense? Fantastic. So in terms of individual and peer risk factors, one of the big ones is low perceived risk of drug use. With 57% of our respondees coming in considered high risk for that attitude. And what that means is kids don't think it's dangerous. They have a really low perceived risk. And one of the things that reinforces that has been the one pill can kill rhetoric that we're seeing. Because what happens if your kid tries this? They don't actually die. It, in fact, is kind of fun. And they're like, well, I guess it was another lie adults told me to keep me from doing fun things. I guess maybe drugs aren't that dangerous. And that's an incorrect assumption. But also so is like the top level one pill can kill fear mongering aspect. We want to have a risk aware approach to substance use. We want to be able to make accurate calculations about our safety. 46% of our respondents reported being at high risk for depressive symptoms, which when we ask on our OPNA, that's a whole wide range of questions that assess for that. And only 15% of our kiddos are at high risk for their friends or peer group actually using substances or having a favorable approach to those, which is really, really interesting when we think about it. So on the next slide, we're going to be talking about the same thing, but in reverse. We're going to be looking at protective factors. Points for anybody who wants to tell me what the similarities for all of these are. If you guess pro-social involvement, it's pro-social involvement.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's like some overlapping, obviously.
Yeah. So when we're looking at these particular stats, the statistic presented, that number is the number of students who were considering being low coverage. So actually being excluded from the protective benefits of these. And when we're looking around at all of them have in common opportunities for pro-social involvement. And we're going to talk a little bit more about what it means to be pro-socially involved, a couple slides down. But the bottom line from this slide is that the vast majority of our kids don't feel like they have rewards for being pro-socially involved. And they don't feel like they have opportunities. So even when they try, and even when they try to be involved, even when they find opportunities, they don't really get any reward from it, which is interesting, right? Because it really does lead us to the question of, well, how do I give you more opportunities to be pro-socially involved? And how do we make sure that you feel rewarded and compensated for your effort and for your time? But before we get into what it means to be pro-socially involved, let's sum up the statistics. First and foremost, we can see from this that kids that are engaged, encouraged, and involved at all levels of their social continuum, so from individual right on up to their community, the more engaged and involved kids are, the less likely they are to use substances just in general across the board, but they're also happier and healthier, just all around. Also, none of these numbers outweigh the feedback and experience of your kids. Because you and I both know that statistics are never going to have the same depth and impact that your kiddo's real life experience are going to have on their interactions with substances and their interactions with you. So definitely look at these statistics, definitely keep them in mind, but also make sure that you're talking to and comparing notes with your kiddo. Also, remember that these statistics go both ways. If I say 15 kids report using cannabis, I'm also saying that 85% of kids are reporting not using cannabis. So remember to flip those. And remember that which end of the statistic you focus on really, really changes your outlook. Because instead of focusing on the 15% of kiddos that are using those substances and really, really cracking down on them and taking a very punitive approach, what we can do is celebrate and say, hey, 85% of kiddos are not using cannabis right now. What is making it so that they're making this healthy choice? And how can we translate it so that we can reach the other 15%? So flipping our perspective on these statistics can really, really help. And I also want to note that very often the presence of protective factors significantly outweigh the risk factors when we consider overall outcomes. I think a lot of parents spend a lot of time being very concerned that they're doing what's best for their kiddos and that they're taking good care of them and they want their kids to be safe. And we spend a lot of time focusing on all of the risky things that can happen to our kids when they're not right in front of us and right where we can take care of them directly. What I want you to know that the work you put in to providing protective factors goes so much further than all of the work you put in to worrying about the risk factors. So I assume that a lot of you have heard about ACEs. We talked about it right at the beginning, that ACE score, adverse childhood experiences, contributing to trauma. But I also don't want to skip out on their equal and opposite force, PACEs, protective and compensatory experiences. And remember how I was like, yeah, being pro-socially involved is really where it's at in terms of protective factors. Here are 10 ways to be pro-socially involved. And like, they exist on a theme, right? Of being engaged and involved and interacted with. So first and foremost, participation in sports or other physical activities. Let your kiddo join that soccer team. If you're at soccer practice, you don't have time for anything else. Opportunities for learning and education, even above and beyond school. Having a best friend, having peers that they can relate to and relate with, super helpful. Being part of a social group or organization, just like Nancy was saying, that sense of belonging as a protective factor really, really does matter. Having a safe, clean home with enough food to eat. Please notice that I did not say having a big fancy home or all of the latest gadgets or toys. I said having a safe, clean home with enough food to eat. Volunteering in the community, being involved, being engaged on the big community level, things that get them outside of themselves and engaged and working so that they can see that their efforts have an impact on something bigger than them. Having interesting and engaging hobbies. I'm going to take that one step further, having interesting and engaging hobbies that they can talk to you about, because you're one of the most important people in their lives. And I want you to think about how special and important you feel when people take time to listen to the things that are important to you. Works just the same way with your kiddos. So yes, unfortunately, you are going to have to sit there and listen to the 45-minute talk on Roblox or Five Nights at Freddy's or whatever their interesting or engaging hobby is. It's good for you, it's good for them, I promise. A living environment with fair rules and clear routines, having set structure, having things to fall back on, these things are really helpful. And they're a really great way for them to be pro-socially involved at the family level. If they know what the rules of engagement are, they're going to be significantly more likely to engage in them. Having a close relationship with a mentor outside of the family, super important. Maybe they have a coach that they really look up to and respect. Maybe they really, really vibe with the librarian. A whole lot of options and a whole big long spectrum of people outside of your main team that you can lean on. And then finally, the most important one, unconditional love from a parent or caregiver. And that's one that you guys are already really good at giving. So congratulations, you're already 1 out of 10. So now that we've talked generally about substance use for youth, I want to narrow our focus in and talk a little bit about opioid overdose specifically, both because it's one of the most common issues that we're seeing in Oklahoma in terms of drug overdose deaths, and also because it's largely what I focus on in general, and so I know the most about it. Just like before with our general substance use risk factors, a risk factor is anything that's going to make a situation more likely to occur or more dangerous in the event that it does. So specifically for opioids, we can look at these. And this is a non-exhaustive list of those risk factors, because you and I could sit here all day and come up with new ones that would probably impact that risk. But these are our heavy hitters. First and foremost, using substances alone or in an inaccessible area. Most common place for someone to die of an opioid overdose in Oklahoma is in their own home behind a locked door. Next, we have mixing opioids with other medications or substances, especially alcohol. Both of those are depressants and can lead to some really, really bad interactions. We really want to make sure that we're having the conversation with our kids about how dangerous that is. Next, we have changes in tolerance from not using or using less. Your opioid tolerance can drop significantly in as little as 2 days, which is not a long time. And it does mean that if you have someone who's getting out of detention, maybe someone who's experiencing a relapse, or has had a period of abstinence due to maybe being in detox, that period right after relieving that space of abstinence is going to be significantly more dangerous. Next, we have changes in quality or purity of substance, especially if you were getting your substance in an illicit manner. What you got today is not going to be the same as what you got last week. And it's not going to be the same as what you'll get tomorrow. So test it before you use it. Having poor nutrition, chronic health issues, or a weakened immune system. Anything that impacts the way your body works is going to impact the way it interacts with opioids. Period, end of story. And this goes across the whole spectrum of use. Maybe you have an older adult in your life who's on dialysis and really, really needs to watch what pain medication they take. Maybe you have someone who has liver failure or congestive heart failure, and they also need to watch what medications they're taking. And then we have using a substance without testing it first. So we have fentanyl test strips that are available. I really, really encourage you, if you're going to use, test it before you use it every single time. Because not knowing what's in a substance could be really, really dangerous. And we're going to talk about some practical overdose prevention strategies. These are things that are super easy to implement, super easy to use, and will overall reduce opioid overdose deaths. First and foremost, education. It's my favorite. My favorite. Because people who know better can do better. And if you don't know something, you can't implement it and you can't use it. Some common questions people who are in active use or people who really want to prevent overdoses might ask is, how do I use this safely? What are the drug interactions for this? Can I use this, or is it going to interact with one of my other prescription medications badly? Where do I go when I need help, when I need resources? What are my options if I'm dealing with this? All of those questions have answers, and those answers can help save lives. Next, we have naloxone, heavy hitter, wonderful substance, wonderful material. A little bit later on in this presentation, we're going to talk about exactly how and when to use it. Then we have fentanyl test strips. Like I said before, if you are going to use substances, test them before you put them in your body. I like to think of these like I think of condoms. It is a potentially risky behavior, but we have a tool that can make it safer, provided you're using it every single time and in enough time for it to be helpful and useful. Then we have substance use safety plans. I know I have a fire safety plan. I hope my house never catches on fire, but I know what to do in the event that it does happen to me. These are things that you can develop with your kids so that everyone's on the same page and you know what to do if you come upon that emergency. Coping mechanisms. Having an alternative to substance use, incredibly helpful. What do you do for your emotional coping mechanisms? What do you do when you're stressed or angry? Does it involve a substance? What coping mechanisms are you modeling for your kiddos? Having those things in advance when you say, okay, when I feel hurt, when I feel sad, I don't reach for a substance. I do my meditation. I take a walk. Having healthy alternatives helps fill that void. Using the Never Use Alone hotline. I love this program. I love this hotline. They don't pay me. I don't even volunteer. I doubt they even know I plug their hotline as often as I do, but I do. Because remember when I said most common place for someone to die of an opioid overdose is alone in their own home, and how dangerous that is, here's a solid alternative. It's run by volunteers, people with lived experience, so you're never going to receive judgment. It's a free 24-hour hotline. You call in, they're going to ask your first name. They're going to ask what substance you took. They're going to ask how much. They're going to ask for your location. And they're also going to ask that you leave a door unlocked so that they can reach you in the event that you need help. And while you use your substance, they're going to stay on the phone with you the entire time. And if you become unresponsive, they're going to contact EMS on your behalf, which is remarkable. And then we have lots more. And you and I could sit here and brainstorm ideas that would work for your space, because I'm sure that you have some wonderful ideas and notions of things that would reduce opioid overdoses in your own areas. And honestly, I'd love to hear them. So if you want to sound off, put them in the comments, put them in the chats, go ham. But next, we are going to move along a little bit and we're going to talk about naloxone in more detail and spend some time here with this one, because it really is one of the top tier practical tools that we have in our toolbox. First and foremost, naloxone is a medication used for opioid overdose reversals. It has no effect on non-opioid overdoses. So if there's no opioids in the mix, you're not going to have an effect. I could give myself naloxone right now and I would have a runny nose because there's no opioids in my system, which is great, right? It means that we can give it to anybody without worrying that we're accidentally going to hurt them. We know that it's safe, it's effective, it cannot be abused, it is non-euphoric, which means you can't use it to get high or anything like that. You can't overdose on it. And we know that it works fast. It works within 1 to 3 minutes. And in 1 to 3 minutes of giving it to someone who's experiencing an opioid overdose, we should be seeing some sort of response. However, it's a temporary fix. After you use it, your next step needs to be emergency medical services. It is significantly more like giving someone an EpiPen shot than it is anything else. It is not like a one and done type deal. You are going to need to call for help. And it lasts for around 30 to 90 minutes. And that window is going to be squishy depending on a whole bunch of factors, like what substance they took, how much, what their individual personal tolerance is. So don't bank on always having that full 90 minutes to get help. So with that information in mind about naloxone, we're going to talk about something we call RRR, which is recognize, respond, and reverse. All of the steps that you do if you suspect someone is having an opioid overdose. First, we're going to recognize an opioid overdose. First thing to keep in mind is that an opioid overdose is a breathing emergency. It's like someone choking or going into anaphylactic shock. The danger is that they're not getting oxygen to their brain. That's why people die of an opioid overdose. And our first goal, our really big main goal, is to make sure that that person gets air. So some of the signs that someone is having an opioid overdose include breathing that is too slow or gone. They might be making a gurgling or rattling sound. If they can breathe, they are unable to be woken up. If you shake them, call their name, even if you do something painful, they're not going to wake up. Their skin's cold and clammy. Their pupils are really, really small. They're pinprick pupils. And they don't respond to light, even if you were to open up their eyelids. They might be choking. We know that having an opioid overdose impedes your ability to swallow. And we're going to see cyanosis on our extremities. So blue lips, blue fingernails. However, if you're dealing with someone who has a darker complexion, what you're going to be looking for is a light purple or an ashy gray on those lips and fingertips instead of the blue. So we've recognized that we're having an overdose. We've recognized that we're in trouble. What do we do now? Well, here are all 5 steps. Our first step is going to be to evaluate for signs of an overdose. We're going to make sure that they're actually in need of our help. Then we're going to contact EMS. That's our next step. We're getting emergency medical services here and on the way soon. Next, we're going to administer naloxone, just like we talked about. Then we're going to provide support breathing and monitor for a response. And we're going to continue repeating steps 3, 4, and 5 until someone of equal or higher training comes to relieve us, just like any other first aid emergency. So we're going to break down these steps in a little bit more detail, just so everybody's on the same page. When we're evaluating for an overdose, we're performing that step 1. We're going to call them, we're going to shake them, we're going to shout them, and we're going to try to wake them up. Once we've done all of our standard checks, we've seen if they're breathing, we're going to administer a sternal rub or another painful stimulus. The whole point is they're not supposed to be able to sleep through this. And if they are, it means that there's something wrong. To do a sternal rub, you're going to take your hand, you're going to make a fist. Front of your knuckles are going to find their sternum bone right here, and you're just going to rock into it, just like so, and you're going to apply pressure. It's not a fun sensation by any means. Alternatives include providing a nail bed press. You're going to take your thumbnail and their thumbnail, and you're just going to press in, just like so. The whole point, you're providing a painful stimulus to see if they respond. And if you can't wake them, shake them, or shout them, it's go time. Next, we're going to call for emergency services. This needs to be our next step before we do anything else, especially if you are in a rural area. I'm from Garvin County. It takes them 45 minutes to even find your house, let alone to grab the naloxone. Like, giving them some lead time is a really good idea. Next, we're going to administer naloxone. When you do this, you're going to remember the 3 Ps: peel, place, press. All of our kits come in a cute little blister pack. It's going to have foil on the back. You're going to tear off that foil, pop out that dispenser, and when it comes time to administer it, you're going to put it right into their nostril. Don't need to jam it in. You don't get points for tickling their brain with the end of the dispenser, and it doesn't make it work better. Just like you're going to give someone an allergy shot, like you're giving them Flonase. Back of your knuckles are going to touch the back of their nostrils, right like this. And then when you're ready to administer that dose, you're going to press down on that plunger. Please don't put your finger on the plunger before you're ready to use it. You don't get test presses. And if you press that plunger, that dose is coming out, just like using an EpiPen. So don't press the plunger accidentally. Don't test it beforehand to make sure, because that's a good way to waste a dose. Next, we're going to provide support breathing. And this is one of the most important aspects, because if you encounter someone having an opioid overdose and you don't have naloxone on hand, you can still provide support breathing. Because remember what I said, an opioid overdose is a breathing emergency, just like someone who's choking. If the only way you have to get someone oxygen that they need is to provide support breathing, that's what you do. So you're going to tilt the head back, you're going to open the mouth, you're going to pinch the nose, and you're going to give 2 slow breaths into that person's mouth, just to make sure that that chest is rising and falling and that that airway is fully open. And you're going to continue doing that, giving them 1 breath every 5 seconds after you've checked to make sure that that airway is clear, until one of 3 things happen. 1, they begin breathing on their own. 2, it's time to administer another dose of naloxone. Or 3, someone of equal or higher training comes to relieve you. Emergency medical services shows up and takes them off your hands. And next, we're going to monitor for a response. Remember, naloxone works quickly. If it's an opioid overdose, you should see that person's breathing start to really, really improve within 1 to 3 minutes. However, sometimes you might need to have another dose. If they don't wake up after that first dose, that 1 to 3 minutes has passed and you're not seeing any kind of response, you can go ahead and use another dose. But I do want to mention a couple of things. First and foremost, Naloxone only works on an opioid overdose. So if what someone is experiencing is a polysubstance overdose, where maybe they have an additional sedative worked in, you're not going to see them jump up and be alert. What we're going for is restored respiration. We want to see them breathing on their own. That's the successful reversal. And we really do want to make sure that we're doing that full cycle of support breathing before we jump in and add another dose. The last thing we want to do is accidentally send someone into precipitous withdrawal. So be patient, work your steps, and feel okay to use multiple doses if you need them, but really do make sure that you're giving it enough time to work and that you're just not panicking and providing doses that you don't need. We always want to make sure that we're using the least amount of naloxone necessary to restore respiration. It's called doing compassionate reversals. So you're going to alternate your doses with rescue breathing. You give a dose, you do that full cycle of rescue breathing. If they're not responsive after that, you can give another dose and then do another cycle of support breathing. And you're going to do that until they begin breathing on their own. At that point, you can put them into a recovery position. But in all cases, you're going to want to stay with that person until emergency services arrive. And if they become responsive, you're going to want to explain what's going on, that you've provided them naloxone, and that you've called for help. So, a little bit of a refresher on the recovery position. We're going to tilt that head backwards and make sure that that airway is nice and clear. All the time, we want that clear airway. And then you're going to tuck the arm at the side so that it's right underneath their cheek. And you're going to tilt that top knee up to a 90-degree angle. And when they have both of those limbs bent and braced, you're going to roll them towards you so that their weight is resting on that bent knee and that arm that they have underneath their cheek. This does a couple things. Most importantly, it means that if that person becomes sick, if they vomit, they're not going to choke on anything. And that's really, really important. So remember, our goal for a reversal is regular, independent respiration. It's not necessarily going to be full alertness. What I care about is that they're breathing on their own, that 10 breaths a minute without assistance. That's our goal. That's what we provide naloxone up to. So, all of this in mind, we've talked about how to do our triple R, recognize, respond, reverse. We're now going to talk about safety plans because we have this first aid knowledge in our brain. And we have all of the information about the risk and protective factors as well. Now what we're going to do is talk about how to integrate them into something that can be helpful and how to make a plan. So, like, your kids know what to do if the house catches on fire. They know where to go. This is the same principle. Obviously, we're hoping that they won't ever have to deal with this, that they won't ever have to encounter it. But if they do, I'd much rather they be prepared and ready and not scared and confused or concerned about what to do. So make your plan as a family. Talk to them about it, make it collaborative. It is a plan that you're making together as a group and not something that you're enforcing on your kids. And your safety plan will be unique to your family. I know my safety plan is probably going to be different from what yours is, but here are some things that your safety plan could include. One, how to gracefully decline substances if offered, because it's always an awkward conversation. What do you say? No, thank you. I don't want any cocaine. I'm just in this tiny bathroom with you. Having a script in advance is one of the things that can really, really help save time. How to implement triple R. Going through all of the steps. What do you do? How do you recognize and respond to an overdose if you find yourself in that emergency? Where to go if they need resources or risk reduction tools? Some of their favorite emotional regulation skills. Talking about a thing to do in advance. Like, hey, I know if I get upset and my alternative is substance use, or it's this other healthy coping mechanism, having that coping mechanism talked through, laid out in advance, really helpful. Hotline numbers or other resources. Putting that never use alone hotline on the fridge. It's there. It's ready to go if you need it. I also hope I never have to have the poison control number, but it's up there. Who do I talk to? Who do I go if I have a safe person to talk to and vent to? Putting that in that safety plan. The location of your family supply of naloxone. If you all keep naloxone, maybe it's in the medicine cabinet, maybe it is by the fire extinguisher. Making sure all of your kiddos know where it is and how to use it in the event of an emergency can really save lives. Rules and laws that might apply to them. The next slide we're going to talk about is actually Oklahoma's Good Samaritan laws. But there are other tools and other rules that apply. And what applies to you is probably going to be variable from what applies to me. So talk through it with your kiddos. And then anything else you feel would help. It's your safety plan. Make it how you want to make it. And it can take a lot of different formats, right? Maybe you guys have a Word document. Maybe it's laminated and up on your fridge. Maybe it's in your family's emergency binder. Whatever works best for you is what works best for you. So, good Sam, what you should know. We know that every second counts in an emergency situation, especially for something like an opioid overdose. And in Oklahoma, the only way that you can get in trouble for helping someone in a medical situation is if you start helping and then you leave. However, we also take it one step further and we have legal protections in place for if you are encountering someone who's having an opioid overdose. So if you call on behalf of yourself or someone else and you're seeking help, you cannot be charged with possession of drugs, which is a really big worry, right? One of the big things that we see, especially in youth overdose deaths, is one of the kiddos got into trouble and then all of their friends didn't know what to do and then panicked and then left because they didn't want to get in trouble. That's what this law right here is designed to protect against. And it does have some caveats. First and foremost, it cannot protect you against any outstanding warrants. It's also not going to prevent you from being charged with drug trafficking, distribution, or possession with intent to distribute. However, all of those scenarios are very specific things that have a really, really high weight amount of drugs that you have to have on your person to qualify for being charged with those. For the vast majority of emergency situations, if you call on behalf of yourself or someone else, you're not going to get in trouble. Keep this in mind. Talk to your kids about this. Make sure they're aware of their rights, because that really, really will help take them from someone who's a bystander to someone who's a first aid specialist and someone who's intervening and saving lives. And then finally, how to communicate this to your kids, because I know that this is a hard conversation and a lot of people really shy away from it because it's awkward and it's heavy. And we're worried that if we talk to our kids about doing drugs, that it'll make them curious or make them want to engage with it more. And we actually find that the opposite is true. The more well-informed kids are about this, the less likely they are to use substances, just across the board. So here are some tips and some tricks. First and foremost, take a collaborative approach. It is you and your kiddo against the problem. It is not you versus your kids. You're in this together. Approach it like that. Spend as much time listening to your child as you do talking when you're talking about this topic, because they have valuable information to give you, right? Just like we talked about at the very beginning of our presentation, a lot has changed. And the ideas that you have might not be the reality that your kiddos are living. So we really have to have a two-way street here. Next, do not lie or sugarcoat this topic. I know when things are uncomfortable, we have the temptation to dip into euphemism. We have the temptation to dance around or skirt the topic. And this really, really isn't helpful. Use accurate and specific language that's appropriate to their age when you talk about this. They deserve and have the right to make informed decisions, and they can't be informed and make good decisions or risk-aware calculations if they're not actually aware accurately of the risks. And then let it be a continual conversation, not another talk that they dread. You know how you see in the sitcoms, they're like, yeah, I'm sitting down for the talk with my parents, and it's always awkward or funny. This doesn't need to be another one of those, I promise. It can be a continual, ongoing conversation that evolves as your kiddos do. Answer any questions they have, because kids are naturally curious, right? But also, if you don't know something, please don't be afraid to admit it. Say, I don't know, and turn it into an opportunity to go find the answer together. Because oftentimes your kids also don't know the answers to questions. And it does, in fact, make them feel a lot better if they're looking at you and you also don't know, and you're going and you're finding it out together. This is really not the situation to throw out a because I said so. Also, take the opportunity to create the safety plan when everyone is ready. Schedule time, sit down, make it a thing. But don't do it until everybody's on the same page. Be genuine and be open about your concerns and your personal experiences. Talking about all of the things that really have you concerned. Talking about your own personal experiences, coming from a place of genuineness and vulnerability really helps your kids connect to why you care about this. Also, don't be afraid to bring in some statistics to help back you up if you guys want to go through the OPNA together and talk about that, or the YRBSS together and talk about all of the different statistics and how they feel about it and how they feel that the numbers interact with their experience. That's a valuable experience that you can do as a group and as a family. But also, grounding it in your own experiences really, really makes it something that you can connect to more easily. So, this brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you all so much for spending time with me. If you have questions, I'd love to hear from you. I've gone ahead and left my contact information up here on the screen. I'm Bales Chaples again. Or if you are tired of talking to me, you can go ahead and talk to my manager, Gary Shepard, and he'll get you taken care of and all set up as well. And yeah, we'd love to hear from you. We do regular trainings about this topic and more. So if you need information or you would like naloxone in your space, give us a call, give us a ring.